Saddle up your horses.
Pitter patter, let's get at her. It is another episode of the Manely Broncos Podcast, and it's an exciting show because one more time again, the future continues to get bright or locked down, if you will. We're going to be talking all about the news that happened today, and just want to remind everybody that you hit that subscribe button over there on MHRT Network, over there on the YouTube channel. Make sure you follow both Brandon and I, and over there on X, Twitter, and we'll make sure we can follow you back. Obviously, it's worth noting that Brandon is on private because of a certain NBA player down there, and
it doesn't even help. I still get them.
Basically, he is experiencing what linebacker Brandon Marshall went through, when he was a Denver Bronco. So, yeah.
Surprised I didn't even get that either. Another Brandon M.
Yeah. Matty will be here in just a little bit. He's running a little bit late. But excuse me. It's going to be a really good show. There is certainly a lot, as we said, to talk about. It won't just be the biggest news of today, but obviously the Broncos will be having what is it, Brandon? Maybe the biggest game that this team has had since for maybe 8 years. So we're going to talk about that Colts game, of course.
It's a big one. It's a big one.
So. Again, make sure you are commenting. And you guys, by the way, for those that are watching on X, you guys can comment over there on X. It looks like it's been shared over on Brandon and my Twitter account, so you guys could be able to comment on there. You can also, if you're watching on Twitch, feel free to comment through Twitch as well as YouTube, and any other avenues, of course. Feel free to chime in as well. All right, it seems like it's appropriate that we jump into the news of the day, the biggest headline of the day, if you will. And that would be that one more time again, the Denver Broncos, or I should say the ownership group, the financial team, and just this team in general has made it a priority, Brandon, that you play well and you play up to a very good standard or even an elite standard. They will reward you, and they will reward you big time in a chance to stay in Denver, for maybe the remainder of your career, or just have a very well-worthy, if you will, extension. And it's safe to say, and we've been talking about it for weeks and talking about it for, maybe even a month now, Garett Bolles has been deserving of a contract extension for quite some time now.
Oh, absolutely. And it kind of feels like this is the Cortland Sutton deal also comes to mind, but this feels like the quintessential, almost drama, if you will, about just what's going on with the current roster. Thanks, Mike. And see you're hopping in here 2 hours early to give us that. Wow. Appreciate it. The quintessential contract discussion that's kind of been going on, right? There's been that drama going on with Bolles for a little bit now. He's wanted the money. Obviously, he deserves the money. He's been one of the best left tackles in football. Although I still get just triggered hearing holding offense number 72, which unfortunately we did hear before. But good for Bolles. I got to be honest, I wasn't sure if it was going to happen. Not really because I didn't think we'd pay him. I wasn't sure if he wanted to stay. I mean, we all remember that quote that he gave last season. No, it was after the Dolphins game. It was literally just a year ago where he had said, I've been here for 7 years and all I've done is lose. And that just sounds like a guy who is not super happy with where he's at. And Peyton got him to buy in. Bo Nix got him to buy in. I can't tell you which one of them. Maybe both of those are true. Someone just got Bolles to believe in the future of this team, and obviously we're now playing very much for a playoff spot this Sunday against the Colts. Like, this feels like a win and you're in kind of game. And man, I hope first of all, I hope we get in 4 players like Bolles, 4 players like Sutton, who had to go through the I'm not even going to say bumps, because they were like, I don't know, potholes, if you will, of last big potholes. Kind of like it's like the road that never gets maintained and just looks like a war zone of the last, their entirety of their career, honestly, in Denver for the past like 7 years in Garett Bolles' case. And just nice to see him get some money. Also nice to see him stay. But I also I believe he could have gotten more if he left. Like, he took a hometown discount.
One more time again.
Yep. He got about $20 million a year, which is still like a lot of money. Don't get me wrong. But I feel like with the kind of player he is, with the left tackle market, with the just kind of demand of that position, and the lack of supply, like, he could have gotten probably $25 million a year, maybe more. So him staying and us getting a little bit of a deal, and obviously we can afford it, but just gives us more, like, even more money to work with this offseason. It's also nice because it looks like we gave him quite a bit guaranteed. I'm wondering how that was structured, because we're still going to have a little bit of the rust dead cap hit on the books next year, but not nearly as much. So kind of interested to see how that kind of panned out. But it sounded like talks really accelerated after we beat the Browns, because I know before then, like, it's every time I heard any report about us trying to negotiate with Bolles about an extension, it just like was making there was no progress being made.
It was at an impasse every time.
It was a standstill, total standstill. Yep, it was a Mexican standoff. They were both standing there pointing guns at each other and seeing who's going to blink first.
Not exactly the Three Amigos.
Not the Three Amigos, but
the
2. I'm not going to say amigos, and I'm not going to say enemies. I don't know what they were, but just great to see that deal come through. Was absolutely not at all expecting that to happen today, but it was really nice to see. Welcome surprise. I mean, Brandon, you're putting some bad name with us. Brandon's, man, he's not been that bad. No, I mean, it's still a little bit of an issue with him. Like, obviously he had one against the Browns, but what tackle doesn't get the occasional holding penalty, right? Devin, thank you so much. And it just kind of feels like one of those things where it's, it's not really going to be completely avoidable. You have a guy, especially like Bolles, who plays with that level of passion and energy. And just with that position, like, you're going to be called for holding every once in a while. But credit to Bolles is, like, he's really turned his entire career around. Zach Strief is apparently a hell of an offensive line coach, but really since he got to work with Mike Munchak, who kind of has that reputation of being one of the best offensive line coaches in the game, he really was able to clean everything up. And I'm glad we kept him, because if we didn't sign him to this extension, I mean, this is going to be a good tackle class, and I would honestly still draft one, and we can talk about that as we go. But that was going to be an absolutely gigantic hole on this roster.
I don't know. I don't know whether or not this is a good tackle class or not. But I think that just the overall just sentiment is it's really hard to find a left tackle, and you and I even touched on this around some of the contract talks. You let him go, you're kind of basically making it well known what you are possibly going to be wanting to go after in terms of what your biggest need will be heading into the offseason if you decided to move on from Bolles entirely, because and so now the fact that you have your left tackle locked up and your blind side of Bo Nix locked up, I mean that should be very exciting. And I think that we should start probably from the very beginning on this, because Garett Bolles, the moment he was drafted, was criticized by a lot of people. a lot of people. You know what I mean? And
I was one of them. I'll eat the crow. I'll admit it. He did not look great
yeah, and
coming in as a rookie, and he was also an older rookie, right? So you were kind of concerned about that trajectory and him just having a bit of a shorter career. What up, Mike? And I mean, with this contract, like it kind of seems like he's gonna play out his career in Denver, because by the end of this contract, that's going to be his age 36 season, and like it's not it's not impossible for him to.
Yeah,
go ahead.
No, he 36, 37, but still, like
yeah. It's not impossible for him to play beyond that. I mean, Andrew Whitworth, enough said, but
Tyron Smith.
It does seem like I would not be surprised if, could we maybe tack on a couple extra years there? Sure. But this just to me signals like he's going to be here for his career.
Well, and I do think that just from the start, it was just like, he was a guy that was far more down than inconsistent, right? And I think that a lot of the holding criticisms, the penalty criticisms, the everything like that, it just became second nature for a fan base and everything. But to Bolles, and everything that he was doing is like, that's all that he was resorting to, is just all the holding penalties and not necessarily technique. Well, that's when you insert Mike Munchak, right? You insert Mike Munchak, and then his career just completely skyrocketed to basically where you got a chance to see the talent level of who he was as a offensive lineman, and that is the guy that the Broncos really envisioned when they took him where they did, which was that Christian McCaffrey draft class, right? Because let's even go back there. There were a lot of people, myself included, that were like, oh, let's trade up and go get Christian McCaffrey, right? And just kind of, using Bolles as an afterthought or whatever. But, as the season was progressing, you and I both know there was one player, and Broncos country know there was one player that we knew by the end of it, come April, we were going to be drafting, and it was Garett Bolles. It just seemed like it was inevitable. And so, so then starting from that point to where we are now, the fact that we are at the, to where they have not drafted a single player at tackle since Garett Bolles, and we might actually get to the point where the same thing might actually happen again. Where they may not draft a tackle, post Garett Bolles. I think that trend is going to break here eventually, but it's just so wild to see how things transpired. And then now you re-enter Zach Strief after Bolles has been a little bit inconsistent post Munchak, but you bring Strief in here. And now I think one of the most underrated aspects of this whole Garett Bolles thing is the thing with Mike Munchak is, well, he left, right? Munchak left after like his second year.
Yeah.
Strief, for all intents and purposes, is going to be attached to the hip with Sean Payton, barring anything catastrophic of, going to another football team or whatever. He's going to be attached to the hip of Sean Payton for, I'd imagine, a decent amount of years, because you certainly can't, gauge things the way that they, because if something happens and, Strief moves on. But for all intents and purposes of where things are going, Strief will always remain with the Broncos right now. So Bolles,
give him a lifetime contract at this point, because he's had this offensive line. This is one of the best offensive lines in the league.
Yeah,
and I'm glad we're doing whatever we can to keep it that way, because that should continue. That should absolutely be a focus.
There's just a lot of ripple talking points of this, because Garett Bolles since week 2 has only allowed 1 sack on the year, and
I think he hadn't allowed one since week 2.
He hadn't allowed one since week 2.
Yeah.
And then you go over to,
and that was I think that was JJ Watt or TJ Watt, right?
TJ Watt, yes.
TJ Watt.
And then you go over and you look at just the overall landscape of the offensive line. They are, for all intents and purposes, locked up for many, many years. I mean, at this point, I feel like, there might be some contract talks with, maybe maybe Ben Powers here in a little bit. But I mean, you're going to be having some conversations, with maybe Luke Wattenberg here in a couple of years, because these last 3 or 4 games, if not 5 games, Wattenberg has significantly turned it around, arguably playing at, an elite center level. He's number 1 in terms of pass block win rate in the NFL at this point in the NFL season. He's playing at such a great level. So just things are really moving in a direction where this Broncos offensive line, as things currently stand, it might seem like a bit of a crazy take, but I mean, this is the best offensive line maybe at this point that the Denver Broncos will have had since maybe these Super Bowl years of 19, when they went back to back under John Elway.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, I could see that happening. This has been just a hell of a year on the offensive line in general. And I mean, if you're not going to give your rookie quarterback the best weapons and you're not going to give him a great running game, but at least you can protect him. I mean, like, that's absolutely been pivotal to Bo's development. He's also very good at avoiding sacks, but when you have a quarterback that doesn't sack himself, like Russell Wilson in Denver, because he seems to not really do that as much with the Steelers, which credit for him. He's kind of fixed that a little bit, but you make it even harder on the defense to get to him when you give him a absolute wall in front. And then on the off chance they do get close, remember, I think it was week 3 against the Buccaneers where Bo had that insane play where he kind of stepped up a little bit. And this was before he even settled down in the pocket, and he still is working on that. And the game's slowing down for him still. He's still a rookie.
Tremendous play.
Absolutely insane play where he kind of steps up and then feels the pressure directly behind him, can't see anything, just eyes the back of his head, just barely ducks out of it and goes for that run. Just very, very good, especially even as a rookie at avoiding sacks. But then you also give him an offensive line that stops people from getting to him anyway. And that's a recipe for a great offense. And it's nice to see that, again, we're continuing to invest in that. So it feels like, honestly, this is also, at least in my personal opinion, the best trenches on both sides of the ball, and a combination of we have a good offensive line, we have a good defensive line at the same time. It feels like we haven't had that in, I don't even know, probably since the Super Bowl 50 was and that offensive line was okay. But then obviously you had you still had Von Miller, and then you go back a couple of years
as I said, the back-to-back
48.
As I said, the back-to-back Super Bowl years, you could even go as far as there.
You could, although we did have some pretty great.
But in terms of
play before then,
but in terms of
for sure.
In terms of what you're talking about between offensive line and defensive line, it's a fair point though.
Yeah. I think that's the right way to build a team, is build it from the inside out in terms of the trenches. And I do think we're going to see more trench warfare this offseason, because we do still have, we had the John Franklin Myers trade. We still have Zach Allen under contract for another year, but there are some guys on that defensive line that are also going to be kind of coming up here soon. I think DJ Jones is a free agent after this year. So I think that you could see moves being made on the defensive line side of things as well, in terms of more extensions coming. And honestly, I'm all for it. I want to be able to be players in free agency, but I would also rather lock up all of our guys first and let someone else throw all the money at T. Higgins. Would I be happy with maybe pursuing him a little bit? Sure. Yeah. I think that's going to escalate extensively to the point where could we still afford it? Yeah, but is that the best use of our resources? Maybe not. So I do think that you're going to see us do that on the defensive line side as well. This offensive line, the only thing though that just still kind of gives me a little bit of pause is Luke Wattenberg is just not the best at run blocking. That's kind of his weakness, if you will. And obviously still young, still has the ability to kind of clean that up. But obviously we have very little semblance of a run game right now. And part of that is because we do have not the best room. but also I think we could be better at run blocking. So I think that is also something we'd look to maybe improve. I think Luke Wattenberg is a good center, but I also wouldn't be surprised if we maybe sign. I'm not saying we're going to throw big money because like this is a very expensive offensive line, but I wouldn't be surprised if we look at getting like a mid-range veteran center for some competition, and maybe Luke Wattenberg still wins it, but you can't really have too much depth there. But yeah, I mean, the Garett Bolles extension just was chef's kiss to see.
It's kind of like what we did in this last off season, right? Like because they brought in Calvin Throckmorton, who has center, guard, tackle, flexibility, and then
versatility.
And then they brought in PJ Mustipher, right? And obviously PJ Mustipher's not here. So yeah, I think you could probably see, something of the same lines. And David chimes in, and I really think that, this point, needs to be brought up more in the sense of like as far as like how things are being shaping up for the offseason. The Broncos have really handled this exceptionally well from the financial side of things, and just from the team side of things. And it's made it sweeter knowing the fact that this team is trending in the right direction with a unit for the most part, except for some pieces here and there, that have been here and have had a losing culture. And so to have a team that is been around a losing culture for a majority of it and have been bought in by Peyton in not even 2 years. I mean, they were playing really good football, even still under Russell Wilson. So, when he was here. So the fact that things are being churned in a direction positively, I think is really good. Cortland Sutton being, maybe the next in line for a contract extension, but the way that things are shaping up is that the priority of this team may not to what you, to where you're talking about is that you could actually see this team, their priority isn't necessarily free agency because of how good they're playing right now. It's far more important that they keep the guys that they must keep, that are on this football team right now. Guys like Zach Allen, guys like Nick Bonito, who's going to be needing a contract after next season. Zach Allen, who's going to be needing a contract after next season.
Yeah.
Cortland Sutton might be the next contract extension that gets done maybe sooner rather than later, but it's worth pointing out he's here next year. John Franklin Myers, I think, is gone after 2025 or 2026. Malcolm Roach is going to be gone after 2025. So they do have some needs to be taken care of, but it does give you also the idea with this Garett Bolles question that them going into this offseason makes you wonder with how aggressive they've been already and whether it's been locking some of these players up, is that their sole focus is to go into this offseason building the best possible team they can, either in the draft or in free agency. I would venture to guess with how things are shaping up with them locking all these guys, that's going to be coming through the draft. And that should be exciting because of the current trend under George Paton. Yes, George Paton, where the draft and develop that we are seeing right now from George, boy, is he on a heater right now. With all these players absolutely cooking at the right time. Quinn Miners, Pat Surtain, Nick Bonito, Jonathan Cooper. He has been just hitting now on every single one of these because of the fact they got the coach right.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just excited, man. I'm excited for this offseason. This is like one of the most exciting off seasons I can remember going into. Actually, I'm curious. So, Flying Dragon Films, moving on from McGlinchey, that's interesting. I don't know.
Maybe Palcho, that's probably his thinking, is maybe having Paul Chesky.
I don't know if Mike McGlinchey's contract allows us to do that, but I'm going to find out. That's an interesting idea. Let's see here. So he's under contract until 28.
But is there an out in his contract, though?
There is after next season. So you're not really going to be able to move on from him next year, he's going to have a cap hit of almost 24 million.
Yeah. So
I don't think that's happening, but that was an interesting idea. I saw that and I was like, that's intriguing. A way to save some money on the offensive line, but you're actually not saving any money.
I don't see it, but I wouldn't be surprised. Didn't he actually restructure his contract? I thought I saw that someone restructured. I know Sutton did. I think he did. Sutton did it like twice.
They did restructure it in March to free up some cap space. So this year,
those are probably
they just converted his salary to a signing bonus.
And then they did the same. That's right. And then they did the exact same thing with Ben Powers as well.
Yeah. That didn't really affect the dead cap hit that we'd have to take on if we cut him.
Yeah. But I just think that, going forward, the team has clearly made it a priority that they want to reward these players. And I do think that Sutton is the next one in line to probably get it with the amount of restructures that he's been able to accumulate. And I think that that's where it's going to be, you look at Garett Bolles. I mean, you're looking at, what is it, Jonathan Cooper now. And now Garett Bolles, where there's been some hometown discounts that have been involved. And I think there's a little bit of some factors here. And, that would be they want to stay here. And two, they feel like there's a franchise quarterback in Denver. Say it for what it is. They feel like there's a franchise quarterback in Denver, and that changes everything. And that is a separate talking point. And so I think Sutton specifically, I would venture to guess he feels that way. Wouldn't be the least bit surprised for as much as, he'd been taking these restructures. Where does he fall in line with some of these deals, right? Because when I look specifically at the wide receiver contracts, Brandon, that's like the one example that I feel like is going to end up being like the NBA in terms of contracts, because right, the NBA hands out like 10 to 12 to $15 million contracts to role players. And then all like the max contracts or the larger contracts to those starter level players. Sutton's going to kind of find himself in this situation where, and the Broncos is maybe they do need to, give, a really good contract to him that may be close to that $20 million a year. And I think that, for the Broncos, what I think you would be maybe weary of just a little bit is that, or confident in, is that, all right, Cortland, you said you didn't want to have a pay cut necessarily early on, or you were holding out because you wanted a new deal. Well, right now, currently this season, Cortland, you are playing at a top 10 wide receiver level statistically and on the field. You were playing really well. So I think that, there was a stat by, I want to say it was Tyler Gorse on Twitter that said that he is the number one wide receiver in the National Football League on third down.
He is.
And so I would not be the least bit surprised if the Broncos punt on a deal that necessarily includes $20 million a year just for one more year, just to see if he can be able to do it again. But I also wouldn't be the least bit surprised if they came back and said, okay, we see you.
Yeah. With Courtland Sutton, it's a kind of another one of those Garett Bolles situations, honestly. And like seeing the Bolles extension go through just gives me more hope for retaining Sutton. And I do think Sutton should be retained. I think we should try to do everything we can to keep him. Like the relationship and rapport that he has built clearly with Bo Nix this season has been astounding. And you need to keep that, by whatever means possible. So he's definitely the best third down wide receiver, but I believe since week 8, I think it is, he's also has the second most receiving yards in the league since that time frame behind Jerry Jeudy. And that's pretty much being completely bolstered on Jerry Judy's part from his 235-yard game.
They also, did you know that? Did you know that like during the Rams game or something like that, or that epic Rams Bills game, by the way, They showed the stat that said who are the top 5 duos statistically.
Uh-huh.
Was it like targets and the what is it, the passes that and including catches or whatever between the two of them.
Mhm.
Sutton at that point in time, like Sutton and Bo were number 1.
Yeah. I did see that actually. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think if I had to guess right now, I think Cortland Sutton is the next contract that you see happen. And I would be super hyped about that. Like, I think that's absolutely the right move to do.
Yeah. So yeah, it's certainly going to be worth watching because, you want to, and I gotta say, like, it's super exciting. Maybe not necessarily from the flashiness that we might see in the off season, of them, bringing guys in, but it's also, twofold, right? Like it's twofold in the sense that we say, it may not necessarily be exciting, but what's to stop someone, like a T. Higgins to say, I don't want to play with the Bengals anymore. I'll test free agency. But you know what? There's this one team. There's this one team that is just really exciting out there that I want to go take a visit and see what's there. Because there have been teams, right? There are players, right, that go test the waters in the offseason and be like, and for many people that think he's going to get a much larger deal, and he doesn't, but he goes to that team anyway. So, like, that could be the case for the Broncos in the sense, like, we think that they're going to be paying some of these guys, right? And they still might, but it's just for a player like a Higgins where he's going to the offseason and he's like, yeah, you know what? There's this one team down there in Denver that, you know what? I think I might be interested in something that they got cooking down over there, and I think I will take a visit. So I wouldn't want to rule out anything, but I just think that just from the excitement level of them bringing in and signing all of these guys that are possibly in your team is super exciting. So it's a much different level of what we've seen in 2014, right? In terms of an off season. But now that you have hit on your quarterback in arguably the first year, it seems like things are trending in the right direction for sure. And speaking of
trending in the right direction,
Matty is in the house. How are you doing, buddy? You just entered, like, just as we were wrapping up the Garett Bolles conversation. And we were just getting ready to talk, or we were just talking about Cortland Sutton. So fill us in about this Bolles extension from your point of view, that 4-year, beautiful 82, excuse me, beautiful $82 million contract of 40 some guaranteed.
And it's after 2 years we have an out, right? Am I remembering that correctly from earlier today?
Yeah, I think it's in essence almost a 2-year deal
Yeah. So, I mean, with his age, like, that third year is where we're really starting to get concerned about the return on our investment. And so this gets him all that guaranteed money, gives him the stability that he wants. And if he's still performing well, then, like, we have the option to keep him on. But I think it was a good deal for all parties. It keeps things, very harmonious in a way, because now we can just focus on, the season and the task at hand and not worry about what his future looks like. And that gives Bo Nix certainty too with who's protecting his blind side. So, now, obviously he's a rookie. We have a lot to play for. Like, there's a lot on Bo's plate, but that's at least one less thing that he has to be concerned with. And I think it goes a long way towards bridging the gap for guys that have been here through the suck and have, paid their dues, and now they're starting to reap the benefits of it. And unfortunately, Broncos country favorite, Justin Simmons, wasn't able to be here for this renaissance, if you will, in Mile High. But
he's a free agent out this year, and the Falcons.
I mean, and so maybe we'll see. But it's nice to reward a guy who's performed for us through thick and thin. I've been critical of Garett Bolles. It's not a secret. I've also given him his flowers when it's deserved. and he's had a pretty solid season. You know, a couple of bonehead plays here and there happen, but overall, I mean, Bo Nix has stayed pretty clean. Some of that is because of the quarterback, but a lot of that is because the offensive line is putting him in positions to succeed too. So, again, I said harmonious earlier. It's a harmonious relationship there. A lot of synergy between those front five and Bo, and even getting into the play calling. And so the continuity, I love it. You know, finally we're trending in the right direction. We've got our quarterback of the future. We have our left tackle, you know, of the present and quasi future. We have our cornerback one. We just extended an edge rusher. We're going to have to work on another one who's number 2 in the NFL in sacks. But these pivotal positions we have wrapped up. And oh, by the way, our coaching staff, you know, maybe Vance Joseph goes elsewhere, maybe. But we should have a lot of continuity across all levels within our organization, and good continuity at that for the first time in a long time. I mean, even in Peyton Manning's, you know, his reign here, we had quite a little bit of turnover. We went from Fox to Kubiak. We had a year, you know, after Super Bowl 50 with Kubiak, and then we had the health issues, and then it's been, you know, a lot of that carousel graphic that everybody likes to show. It's been like that with our coaching staff as well. Yeah. So I'm very grateful that we have continuity in a good way for a positive upward trend for this team. We have a lot to be grateful for and a lot to be hopeful for in Broncos country.
Yeah. I mean, George Payton's been absolutely slaying it with these extensions, by the way. But one thing, and actually David brings up a good point here as well that I wanted to touch on a little bit more, is like paying Bolles to all these young players that if you work hard, you get paid. Absolutely. Like, you know who I'm hoping takes notice of what's going on with these contract extensions? Nick Bonito. I mean, I have no doubt that we'll pay him. Like, absolutely, we are paying Nick Bonito.
What's his market?
But I do think probably over 20. Yeah. But I do think with the kind of culture we've been seeing that is clearly on this team now, with finally being able to actually win and feel like we have our quarterback, you see guys like Bolles be okay with taking that hometown discount. And I do think George Payton continues his hot streak of signing players before their contract and market value gets too high, taking the opposite of the Cowboys approach, if you will. Continue with Nick Bonito. Like, I would expect that, we're probably going to pay him more than $20 million a year, but I also think it's going to be less than he would get on a fully open market or if we delayed it at all. And I do think we're going to be able to retain him for a good deal. And as much as I do think Courtland Sutton is probably the next contract, it would also not surprise me if it is Nick Bonito.
Yeah, no, it would not surprise me at all. By the way, again, reminder to everybody, make sure you hit that subscribe button over there on the MHRT Network page over there on YouTube for anybody that is just joining us. And make sure you follow Matty as he is on the show. Make sure you follow him at Matty Mulls Pod. Mike chimes in and yells, Matty.
What up? What up?
So,
I'm back.
Yeah, make sure you follow Matty and what he does over there on X and everything. You know, I just think to tie a bow on the whole Garett Bolles thing, it's just a beautiful story of loyalty, perseverance, shutting up your doubters. And, you know, it's one that if you stay true to one football team and, you know, to what Matty was saying, you stay through the suck, you know, you have the chance to possibly get rewarded for something greater. And, you know, there may not have been, I mean, you know, and Courtland Sutton's probably next in line. There may not have been a player offensively, defensively that has been on this football team that it was, you know, in dire need of good things to come his way. And that would be, you know, Garett Bolles, and then obviously soon to be, you know, Courtland Sutton and hopefully Justin, you know, Simmons. I see you, David, can see this, and maybe he comes back. I do think, by the way, that safety's kind of a sneaky need.
A little bit, yeah.
Too. So David, before we chime in into this Colts game, asked, would you guys sign and get another vet wide receiver, or would you stay younger and get some of these players for both? I will say, I think it's going to be all the above. I think it's going to be both. Matty, what say you?
I think a lot of it matters what our draft position is. I know that free agency is going to happen before, right? The free agency frenzy is in March. But we'll kind of know because so the season ends and then we have the rookie combine. And then shortly after that, we have free agency. We will know roughly what the board's going to look like and where we're going to be. I think that's going to matter because running back, tight end, wide receiver are all extremely high on our list unless somebody just falls. And it's a value that we can't refuse. But it wouldn't surprise me for us, like Cam said, to address those things both in free agency and the draft at all of those positions. I don't think if you take an objective look, there's nobody that's irreplaceable right now in our skill positions. Maybe you could say Cortland Sutton with how valuable he's been to our receiving core, but also if you had a chance, say to swing a deal, I don't know, Jamar Chase, for instance, comes available. He's younger. He's an elite wide receiver. We probably couldn't afford to pay Chase throw the bag at him and Sutton. So tough decisions can be made. I don't think anybody's necessarily safe right now at any skill position. And that's a good thing, honestly. We want people to be hungry and want to seek out their jobs, especially there, because we have a long runway with Bo Nix. We're competitive now, and certainly we want to get guys that are ready to compete now. But we have the luxury now of competing today and still being able to have a forward projection for what things look like when Bo hits his prime. People joke that he's 47 years old. Yeah. But he's a quarterback. Maybe his wheels aren't going to be what they are today 10 years from now, but he's going to be a better quarterback 8-9 years from now.
Or 4.
Quarterbacks kind of hit their prime a little later than some of these other positions. And so I think that trajectory looks a lot different.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that they, because and Brandon, you and I had the conversation just regarding the center position, when we had talked about Wattenberg, we feel like they're going to be, maybe adding to that room, adding some competition to that room. I think if you were to make a firm statement, obviously Sean Payton, I don't know why. I think for right now, I think there's four players that are on the wide receiver title, if you say, that are going to be here next year, and that is Cortland Sutton, Devon Bailey, Troy Franklin, and Marvin Mims. I think those guys are going to be here next year. The reason why I bring Sean Payton into this is because I don't know what world is going to be with Little Jordan Humphrey. Obviously, Little Jordan Humphrey and Sean Payton love one another for some interesting reason. So he certainly could be back. But I think that, the wide receiver position is one where, when we talk about double dipping, possibly in free agency and the draft, or even triple dipping, you had 2 in free agency and 1 in the draft, I still think very much is still in play. And I think that, one of the guys, that I would maybe look into, and maybe an Amari Cooper, right? Like an Amari Cooper, if you're going to talk vet wide receiver, and then maybe you kind of go, there's some injuries and everything. Well, give him to our beloved legend, Bo Lowry, and have him do his work. Well, there's a guy out there, he did spend some time with the Atlanta Falcons, but based on scheme and possibly how he would fit, I would love to see what Rondale Moore would be able to do in a Sean Payton type of offense. So I think that Rondale Moore, Amari Cooper, and then you go out and you get an Emeka Ibuka, right? If you want to go out and you get a wide receiver, or if it just so happens that you feel really greedy and you feel like you want to keep a guy a Bronco, draft Ashton Genty. But I just think that, it wouldn't surprise me at all if the Broncos added a couple wide receivers. And we'll say this numerous times, but I will say when you look at the just the overall offseason, free agency still also somewhat counts after the draft, right? Because people always make signings after the draft, and they usually call those the signings before training camp. So that can happen.
Yeah. I mean, I think honestly, I would not be surprised whatsoever if we're going to look at or we're going to see a slightly more quote unquote boring free agency period this offseason. I don't know for sure, but I mean, I think we might be in on T Higgins, but I still don't know if that's going to be the best allocation of our resources. I'd rather see us re-sign some guys, maybe bring back Justin Simmons, maybe look at, safety is definitely going to be a need. Maybe look at someone like Budda Baker if you want to do a big free agent signing. Javon Holland is definitely an option. Although I do think we still sign a wide receiver. I absolutely think that. I think we're going to probably hit the free agent and draft pool at wide receiver. A name who's going to be a free agent this offseason that is not really going to be a super big payday, but is low-key a quality player who's just been on a completely horrendous team, is Darius Slayton from New York. I would not be mind at all signing him and then still drafting a guy. Don't know who is going to be there when we pick. Don't know where we're picking yet, but I would absolutely think that we're probably going to go the route of sign and draft, just to really focus on giving Bo the weapons that he needs in this offense. We've protected him, and that's huge. That's really step number one. Now you got to get him some help. You got to give him another wide receiver that he could throw the ball to. You got to get him a tight end somehow, please, for the God, get him a tight end. And you got to get him a running back.
Warren would be such an
Warren would be. I would honestly take him in round one.
Hell yeah.
I wouldn't even be mad if we took him in round one.
I think he's tight end one in the draft.
Yeah,
he might be.
He won the John Mackey Award, by the way, tonight. Warren did.
He did. And a guy named Travis Hunter won both best wide receiver in college football and best defensive player in college football.
Wait, he wasn't up for wide receiver. It was right. It was. I don't think he was.
Is a wide receiver or just offensive player?
Well, he certainly wasn't up for. Which, by the way, him winning the defensive player of the year and not being up for the Thorpe Award.
Stupid.
No, he got the best receiver.
Interesting.
He got the Biletnikoff and the Benrig.
So Heisman, you think it's him?
Could be Genty.
Could still be Genty.
I think
it's just
coaches would say Genty. I think that the media
and the players
is about Travis Hunter.
Sure. Yeah.
My dad and I talk about
it. It's crazy.
My dad and I talk about it every once in a while, about the Heisman voting system, specifically from Genty and Hunter's perspective. Whoever wins those other regions in regards to Genty and Hunter is probably going to win the Heisman, right? Because you have Genty and Travis that are basically going to be controlling the Midwest, if you will, Midwest and West.
Well, the problem is Dylan Gabriel is going to steal a little bit in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah. So
because some people are, number one, Oregon, so we'll see.
All right. Switching gears a little bit. We'll talk more draft. Dame chimed in and he asked, what is the plan to stop Anthony Richardson as we kind of gear up for the biggest game? There's no sugarcoating it. The biggest game, probably that the Broncos will have had in 8 years. Obviously, they have had, some good games, if you will, and obviously there was a stretch of games when they played the Chiefs and then the Bills back-to-back, that sort of thing last year. But this is big. Like, this is, you win and you are talking about,
91% chance.
Yeah, over 90% of getting into the playoffs versus like 65% in the playoffs. Or if you're the Indianapolis Colts and you want to talk about desperate, they win this game, they're at 68% to get into the playoffs. They lose this game, you might as well eliminate them altogether because they're going to end up being 10% if they lose this game. So, Matty, you had a really nice little breakdown in our chat earlier today. Why don't you tell the class what that breakdown consisted of?
So, ideally, you start fast on offense. You get game script in your favor where you force the passing game for Indianapolis. So they can't just sit and rely on their quarterback run and their running back run and limit their opportunities to make mistakes. I think that everybody's freaking out about Levi Wallace here because of how he was torched against Cleveland. But we are going to be able to run more zone, which is going to limit the impact of what Wallace is expected to do and how long he's expected to lock down coverage. You can't, against a mobile quarterback, you're asking for it if you run man because mesh concepts happen, guys get muddled. If you're not sound in your fits on the outside, the quarterback has a free rein to run. And if your cornerback is running with the receiver downfield, the corner isn't looking at the running back running behind them or the quarterback running behind them. So against mobile quarterbacks, you always want to try to have zone as much as you can. Now, we got in trouble with that against Baltimore because guys like Zay Flowers were able to get, to tear us up, and they were able to move him around the formation. Downs could operate in a similar fashion, except Richardson will not be able to take advantage of that in the same way that Lamar Jackson was able to take advantage of that against us. Plus, Lamar Jackson is better at diagnosing zone blitzes and those schemes and being able to get into the right play or make it the right play. Richardson hasn't shown those chops yet, at least not consistently. So what we do is we get the game script in our favor. We force them to have to throw. We operate in a zone with exotic blitz schemes. And if we need to, if we try to allow our shell to operate in that way. And if we need to, I think we bring in a safety up into the box to be that quarterback spy. And I think that's really the way to go. So we've got to try to neutralize their run for sure, but a lot of zone coverage in this. And I already foresee myself getting frustrated probably in the very first quarter when somebody like Pittman has like 4 catches, for like 48 yards. And I'm like, what the heck are we doing? But it's because we're running zone. Because we're trying to limit Richardson's run ability. Mm-hmm. And then if we get up by 2 or 3 scores and he wants to try to run the ball and keep the clock moving and, kill us with 7-8 yards going down the field and try to sustain drives that are eating 8 minutes of time up, well, that's fine. That's cute. Whatever you got to do, play it. Like, you eat the clock for us. But minimizing the big play and in turn forcing him to make quick decisions off of those blitzes in the quick passing game where he has more opportunity to be wrong. So I think that's what's going to come. Vance Joseph tends to try to operate in that way against certain young quarterbacks. It didn't quite work. The scheme that we wanted to run against Baltimore didn't quite work in that way because they beat us with superior talent and experience. Indianapolis won't have that luxury.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think if you were to sum it up in pretty short words, in the sense of like where things probably have to start, Brandon, would be you stop the running game. You stop the running game of the Indianapolis Colts. I think you have a really good chance of winning this game. Because like to Matty's point, you want to dare them, to throw the football. And the best way that you could possibly do that is by, committing to stop the run. Now, you can't get, carried away a little bit and, lose your discipline a little bit on the back end. But you got to stop Jonathan Taylor and AR5 first things first.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the biggest thing that I think this game's going to come down to is the turnover battle. Like that's going to be the biggest thing, in my opinion, that will have just a large impact on like how this game goes. Obviously, we know Anthony Richardson is a bit of a turnover merchant, and he's actually looked better since kind of coming back from his like mini bench period where he didn't play for like 4 weeks. That's not official. Nice. But the Colts like quietly have tied the Eagles for the most forced fumbles in the NFL. Like that defense knows how to get the ball. And that's something that we haven't really seen a ton of that rookie issue with Knicks yet so far, knock on wood. But I do worry just a little bit with like, we haven't really had a ton of fumbles by the running back room this year, but just like the lack of ability we've had to kind of get the run going. I just feel like there could be a lot of instances where the defenders can kind of go for the punch and maybe get the ball out, and hopefully we don't give Audric Estime that many touches because of my concern. But I think that's going to be a big thing is taking care of the football on our end and also trying to get takeaways on the defense. And obviously that's always a recipe for winning football, but just specifically in this instance, like the Colts defense, it's not fantastic, but it is sneakily good at getting turnovers, whether that is a pick or a forced fumble. And I think that's going to be definitely a key to the game. Now, obviously it is in Denver, which is nice. And that's going to be a benefit for us.
Would you guys be
surprised?
Would you guys feel a little bit different about this game? Obviously, the other maybe minimal factor of this is that the Broncos and the Colts played each other in preseason. Completely different situation than the regular season, but would you guys feel a little bit different if it was in Lucas Oil Stadium versus Mile High?
I would, just because I think that like home field advantage is always going to count for something, but especially when you're in Denver you have the altitude, you have the just amazing best fans in the NFL. I'm not biased at all.
Nope.
That just make it more difficult for what have we heard about all the quarterbacks and players that have said that they've had to play here, and like what they've said about that afterwards. Like this is a very, very tough place to play. And I do think that having home field advantage there, does make an impact. I don't know if I would think that we weren't like, I'll just be honest. I do think we win this game. I don't know what the score is exactly going to be. I think it could be a blowout, or I think it could be a little bit close. But I don't think that us playing in Indianapolis would change my opinion on that necessarily. But I do think it would be a more difficult game if we were not playing it at home. Really, I mean, honestly, Anthony Richardson has looked better. But I do think that, again, the key to this game is going to be the defense making plays and the offense taking care of the football. And I think that is absolutely possible. I mean, I know against the Browns, Bo had those 2 picks. One of them was just an amazing play by the defender. The other one was an absolutely horrible, just a horrible throw, horrible pick, to be honest. Terrible call all around the board, bad pick. But that has been something that, Bo has done pretty well with. So he needs to keep that going.
And one of the biggest adjustments, if not the biggest defensive adjustment, is one that's going to end up being on every Denver Bronco fan's mind in Broncos country, and that will be who's going to be opposite of Pat Surtain as a quarter. It seems like things are trending in the direction of Riley Moss not being there. I will say, in just some conversations, it did seem like it was a bit surprising, that Moss showed up and was actually doing some stretching, and because it certainly seemed like, I fully expect him to be out, but it definitely bears watching in the sense of, over the course of, tomorrow and everything. But, I think that, it's just one that, maybe just by sheer happenstance, they feel like he's very comfortable in warmups and he looks really good. And he's active, so I wouldn't be surprised. But that said, I think we're all expecting Riley Moss to not play. So that leaves us with Chris Abrams-Draine, because the last thing that Bronco fans need, or the team in general, is for their hopes to go down the drain. And so I think that all of us are really hoping that Chris Abrams-Draine is going to be the starting corner opposite of Levi Wallace, or what you'll see is maybe Levi Wallace play a little bit, excuse me, and that would be in those nickel packages where he's, he's covering, those positions, and they got Chris Abrams-Draine on the outside. And I think that he showed in kind of those throw into the fire situation against the Browns. He did pretty well, given the tall order that it was asked in that kind of game.
Yeah, definitely. I will say, I know Matty kind of touched on it a little bit, and I think we're going to try our best to give, if Levi Wallace is out there, give him as much help as we possibly can, play more zone. But man, Riley Moss is absolutely integral and pivotal to this defense, and I don't think we really knew that obviously we knew he was good, but I don't think it became very apparent how good he is and how integral he is to this defense when he was not out there. And just get well soon, man.
How confident would you be if there was a wild card thrown into the mix, and that would be Jaquan McMillan on the outside?
I don't like it. I don't like it.
Yeah, no, don't take him away from what he's good at.
Just because I know that he did some snaps in training camp to where he was playing on the outside. But yeah, by the way, another one of those players that might be deserving of a contract extension. He is an exclusive rights free agent in 2025, by the way, so he will be a Denver Bronco. The question is just, do they scrape that off and actually sign him to a deal? That's going to be remaining to be seen. Okay, yeah. So as far as predictions for this game, I don't know, gentlemen. Brandon, why don't you go first? I have us winning, but it is certainly not a blowout.
I think, again, to me, it also comes down to just honestly, on both sides of the field, do these quarterbacks keep things moving? And what I mean by that is, does Bo Nix continue his run of looking very solid, making plays when it counts, and minus, a very, very great play by the defender and just a completely terrible call against the Browns last week, a relatively mistake-free style of football, but also still being able to push the ball down the field and be able to convert those third downs. That's been huge. If he keeps that going, then I do think that, regardless, I've said this before, I do think we win, but depending on how Anthony Richardson continues to play and how Bo Nix continues to play is going to dictate what that game looks like. And again, it could be more one-sided or it could be very close. And on Anthony Richardson's side, does he continue to play more solid football that, we've kind of seen from him ever since he came back from being benched? He's still not incredible. His completion percentage is still absolutely atrocious. Outside of pretty much the game that he, I believe, came back from being benched against the Jets, where he completed 66% of his passes, but also the Jets defense is really not what anyone thought it was. Against the Lions, against the Packers, he's completed 50% or less of his passes. So even though he has looked better, like, does he keep that going, or does he revert a little bit to, what we had seen from him early in the year? And then also when he was, I'm not really going to say his rookie year, because I think he's kind of still a little bit of a rookie, to be honest. But in 2023, which Anthony Richardson do we get? But I do think I'm going to say the Broncos win. And I'm going to say it is.
Well, let me phrase
28 to 21.
Okay. I don't know. It's hard because of, you also have to call it for what it is with AR5, and that is, right, Matty, is like he's a quarterback that he's throwing at a below 50% completion percentage. And and so it's one where it's like that alone, and specifically, going into this game, it's like you also wonder it was this Cleveland Browns game a blessing in disguise for this team defensively, so that like going into this game, like I feel far more confident that the Broncos are going to score well over 20 points than I am the Indianapolis Colts scoring 20 points, and that's just based on regularity. And so I just think that, I don't know. So I think it's close. I think if the Indianapolis score over 20 plus points or 23 plus points, I think they have a good shot at winning this game. But I still think it's going to be pretty close, Matty. And I think for me, I think it gets to 20, but I think that the Broncos pull it out 24-20.
Well, that's the Vegas implied total. It's 44 with the Broncos being 4-point favorite. Well, 3.5 point favorite. So that's like right on the money. I think we're going to be leading 24-20, and then we get some type of big play defensively, puts us on the doorstep, and we score a touchdown and go up 31-20, and that's all she wrote. We're going to win this game 31-20.
All right.
You think Nick Benito gets another pick six?
No. But he does get a strip sack.
All right.
If we might actually stream Matty's reaction if Nick Benito not only gets another pick six, but we might actually end up having to stream Matty and his reaction if he wins Defensive Player of the Year.
It'll be like the water boy, the coach with the just with the shirt off though. I'll do the whole nine.
The Matty truffle shuffle that
the truffle shuffle died last year. That was bad juju.
By the way, speaking of the playoffs, I just have this strictly with week 15. If the Houston Texans, which by the way, please, Houston, take care of business. If they beat the Miami Dolphins in Houston, and the Broncos take care of business against the Indianapolis Colts, the Broncos will then be sitting at 95%, and that is according to the Athletic Athletic / New York Times.
Can you do next week too? Because just 4 days later we play the Chargers. If we beat them, it's got to be real close to clinch.
So let's pull through these different scenarios here. So Broncos play the Chargers. What scenario did you want to go with?
Well, we win. We win.
Okay. They have they clinch. They clinch.
Yeah. We have a chance. We have a chance a week from today to clinch the playoffs for the first time since 2015.
Now, for pure chaos, if you will,
chaos.
Of the sense that let's just say the Chargers win.
Okay.
It gets dropped to 89%. And then let's go to some of these other games. Who would we need to win? You have the Browns and the Bengals.
But we get to play the Bengals ourselves the following week, so that's not necessarily important. It's the at that point I think it's still the Colts, right?
Might still be the Colts.
Yeah. One more loss by them, and then we have the tiebreaker. They can't make up 3 games in 2 weeks.
And so, but a Titans win over the Colts will put it about 89% still.
We have a lot of pathways to be there, but there aren't so many pathways if we drop this one on Sunday.
Right.
Then Thursday becomes definitely a must win.
I mean, honestly, I'm going to say Thursday's a must. This is a must win.
Yeah.
We got to handle our business. And you know what? How fortunate are we that 2 teams that we're competing with for positioning, we get a chance to play within the next week.
Yeah, talk about
what a great opportunity this is.
Oh my goodness, man.
NFL,
Riley Moss, please.
NFL, we really have to thank you and give you an Academy Award. This was a really good script for, how things are being, handled right now near the end of the year. Just the fact that the Broncos are, playing some teams that they truly control their own destiny. And I'll tell you, I mean, like, do I actually feel confident the Broncos can actually go to the playoffs? I do. But it's crazy to me that, like, you look at the NFC playoff picture and you look at the AFC playoff picture. For as crazy and as wild as, people have claimed that the AFC has been and, or was hoping to be, when Father Time, Aaron Rodgers went over to the Jets and how chaotic that was going to be. Well, that ended up being a non-factor, but still the AFC, for it to possibly be close to being locked up well before week 18, I can't remember the last time for a playoff picture where things have been possibly locked up well before week 18 or the last week of the season.
The NFC, though, is freaking chaos all over the place. Like, yeah, the Eagles are in a pretty good spot. The Lions are in a decent spot, but, like, as good as their record is, there are 2 teams still on the doorstep for them, forcing them to stay honest in that division. Man, there's a lot going on in the NFC. I'm very grateful for a change to be in the AFC, as there are only really 2 teams that I'm, like, really concerned about in the playoffs, and it's not the Chiefs. I'm concerned about Baltimore and Buffalo. Those are the only 2 teams.
Mm-hmm.
I think we could beat anyone else anywhere else.
It's just it's crazy, thinking back to where we were last year, and you look at it this year, the way that they're playing, even without a running game, and you feel so confident, that they can go into any house, and I mean, like, and beat anyone. It's just, excuse me. It's just, it's impressive, and I think that to say it one more time again, this team that was here last year, I mean, for a team to buy in after everything that transpired last year and this quickly, goes to show you the impact, Sean Payton had. So, George Payton, if you're listening, thank you for finagling, if you will, this trade for Sean Payton and trading away a first-round draft pick that you might have had, with the Bradley Chubb deal, and getting Sean Payton out of it.
That was a great first-round pick.
It's a great first-round pick. So moving on to the part of the show where we do talk about some of the draft. We mentioned some guys, and I think David mentioned some positions he said tight end, running back, inside linebacker, wide receiver, corner. The thing about corner, and I will say this, is George Payton loves him some corner. It doesn't matter necessarily if they pan out, but like it seems like in nearly every single draft that he's been a part of, whether it's been Minnesota or Denver, he's always at least made it a priority to draft a corner. So that's still, I'd venture to guess that that's still pretty much in the cards. I think inside linebacker is the sneaky one, Matty. Obviously Cody Barton, another contract extension possible, guy maybe. He just had another interception against the Cleveland Browns. What is that, 3 on the year? So I think inside linebacker is going to be a fascinating one. They can, roll with the guy who clearly is also deserving a pay raise, Matty, and give him to Justin Sternad and give him a pay raise. Or they can go out and go to the draft, go to free agency maybe and get one. But how would you agree with this list, Matty?
I mean, that hits on all the spots. I still wouldn't neglect the trenches. Offensive and defensive line probably still need to be a priority, if not for next year, certainly moving forward. I mean, I don't have the warm fuzzy about long-term right tackle. Although McGlinchey has played better, like
a lot better.
We'll see. And it never hurts to rotate through your talent on the defensive line. But I agree with that. Warren right now is like the guy I've got circled for who could be the biggest contributor for us offensively. On the defensive side, you mentioned inside linebacker. I know a guy who played at OU.
Oh,
he's pretty good.
He's a good stuntman.
Danny Stutzman. Probably a second round pick, a late second right now is what his projection is. I don't think he's going to test as well at the combine. So he may even slide to the beginning of the third round, but he's cerebral and has all the things you want. OU had a significantly improved defense, one of the best defensive units in the entire country. And they all got lined up around Danny. Danny, put the troops where they needed to be. So that's smart. If you're going to have the guy with the green dot, like he's a guy that can do it. So he's a guy that obviously I'm biased, but we got pretty good track record of drafting guys from Oklahoma in the second round. So
they clearly have they kind of have looked at Oklahoma just a little bit, haven't they? And speaking of Barton, there is another Barton in this class who happens to play linebacker and who happens to be Cody Barton's brother, plays for Utah. I think it's was it Landon Barton? Is his name? He actually picked off Shedeur Sanders in the game against the Buffaloes, where CU just decided to blow the doors off of the Utes after the first play of the game. I think that it's going to be the playmaker discussion is going to be so fascinating because the way that this team is currently playing, it's like the conversations have just fluctuated so much. I remember, our good friend Matty, Caden in our predominantly orange Slack chat was mentioning, I'd argue that running back is a little bit more important than, wide receiver or tight end. And like when you specifically look at this team, it's like, it's hard to argue with that. I mean, like you look at the team, the way things are constructed, you give this team a Caleb Johnson, right? You give this team a really solid running back. How good would this team actually be, with someone that is, capable like that, or by sure happenstance, Ashton Genty is there and, and things luck out or you do the unthinkable and you actually trade up for Ashton Genty. How good will that team be with him, in this lineup? So it's just, the things have just changed. And then we just talked about Tyler Warren, right? Like 20 some minutes ago, or like, how will a stable tight end impact this roster? So and I think that a lot of that has just been the emergence of some of these guys like a Troy Franklin, a Marvin Mims, and Cortland Sutton is one of the reasons why we're having these conversations of, well, what would a competent tight end be like, right? Like a Tyler Warren, what would a Caleb Johnson be, for this football team? So it's a fun conversation with the way things have fluctuated.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, one of the position groups that David brought up that we haven't really talked a ton about, but more kind of in the secondary is cornerback. And I do think, obviously we have an amazing room there already, headlined by the best corner in the league. What's that?
Maybe defensive player of the year.
Maybe defensive player of the year. And then backed up by an absolutely just super solid in every way player in Riley Moss. And then you got Jaquan McMillan, the man himself, kind of being your roamer / slot, just beast. But I do think cornerback is one of those positions that you really can never have too many. And we've seen that George Payton probably feels the same way based on his draft record and kind of what he's done. There is one guy who, it's not really something that we specifically need, but I think there is a corner specifically in this class that is kind of like, as he's got the just absolutely elite tools and just combination of measurables that you don't really ever see come around much for corners that, we might decide like, hey, this guy could, be a special player for us in the secondary. And I don't think you can, again, have too many of those. And that's going to be Takario Davis from Arizona, although he is in the transfer portal. Dude is 6'4", 195 pounds, and just absolutely a monster previously for Arizona. Dude just loves using his size to absolutely lay people out. Like, go watch this dude tackle. He is physical. He loves it. And I think, Vance Joseph would absolutely enjoy having this guy in his secondary. Again, I don't know if this is something that they're going to want to invest heavily in. Like, I think he's probably going to be a second round pick. He might even, I wouldn't be surprised if he goes in the bottom of the first round, but this is a very, very good cornerback class. And I think he probably is going to slip to the second. Are there other position groups we could go after there? Sure. But I do think that, you can't go wrong stocking up on corners, especially with, what we've seen from the unfortunate lack of depth that we seem to have there. And I don't know if Damari Mathis is just somehow in like the absolute doghouse, or he is somehow viewed as worse than, what we saw out there from Levi Wallace, which was terrifying to think about. I do think we will probably get at least one corner in this draft, even though, Takario is probably going to be more of an investment. You just don't see players come around with his profile at specifically the cornerback position much. And, he could be special.
It's gonna be interesting. Going back to like the very beginning conversation of when we talked about Garett Bolles, and anybody that's in the chat, feel free to chime in. It got me thinking. When we had this original Garett Bolles conversation about his contract, what do you do? Do you sign him to an extension? Do you do what? Do you do this? Do the Broncos decide not even to use the franchise tag on anyone? Because like, I think that what's great, about, I think the way that the Broncos have gone about this is the players that, right, the players that they, for the most part, would franchise tag are here next year or the year after that. So I don't think they franchise tag anyone. Brandon and Matty.
There's nobody really that I think is franchise tag worthy, especially with not having Bolles in that class. So like just because you have it doesn't mean you need to use it.
Right.
I know that we've traditionally looked to tag somebody just to like move that conversation along to like solidify them, and then we'd extend them later. That was under our previous regime, obviously, but yeah, I don't think that we do that. I do think that we might be paying franchise tag worthy deal to somebody. We might make a trade for somebody who is in contract negotiations, but certainly not franchise tagging any one of our own guys.
Yeah. I will say, I'm not sure this particular team would want to do business with us again, but certainly one position and one player that I would want to file away for my own enjoyment and agenda would be talking to our good friend Scott Mason over there with the Jets and having some conversations about a one Brees Hall.
Brees Hall and Garrett Wilson.
Garrett Wilson as well.
Yeah.
Man, I don't know. The Jets might decide to blow it up. They are screwed. So
Here's a one.
I'd call on both those guys.
Here's a 1. Here's a 2. Here's a 5 next year. Give me both of those guys, and we'll figure it out.
I wouldn't even be mad. I would not be mad about that. Well, Brees's injury scares me a little bit. He's been kind of banged up, and he's still struggling with that knee injury. But
he's interesting because it says you already.
Well, I would trade it first for Garrett Wilson for sure.
Because you already got Braylon Allen, right? So I mean, they could, yeah, they absolutely.
Well, they also have a guy by the name of Isaiah Davis who looks pretty good for them as well. Yeah. Who they drafted in the same draft class that they picked up Braylon Allen, but they got him in the 5th. Isaiah Davis, who's also kind of a beast.
Who do you guys feel like
is far from the biggest problem with the Jets right now?
Who do you guys feel like actually would be a worthwhile team to kind of dabble in the trade market for a wide receiver? Obviously, the Jets. I'm absolutely interested with Jets. With Garrett Wilson. Maybe a reunion of sorts, if you will, for Matty and his fandom, and that would be Debo.
I don't want Debo.
Debo has certainly fallen off this year. I don't know what's going on.
Did you see the absolute drop that he just did tonight?
I haven't watched any of the game tonight.
It was bad. It was bad. Dropped a clear touchdown.
If the injury gets cleaned up, Rashid Shaheed, I think, is an interesting target that people are going to forget about. Maybe you wouldn't be ready
early on for Derek Carr early, yeah.
But let's be real. Those deep balls to Franklin that we haven't been able to connect on, we're connecting on those to Shaheed. Yeah. That's definitely going down. A guy like that would be phenomenal for us. There's rumblings of AJ Brown wanting out. I don't know. There are a lot of receivers that potentially could be on the move this year. Jordan Addison even could be a guy. He's been balling out of late, but he wants a bigger role, and he looks to deserve one. So who knows?
A team I would specifically bring up that is also in the fire sale territory is the Jags. Brian Thomas Jr., they're not getting rid of him. He looks just insane for a rookie, but they still have a guy named Christian Kirk on their roster who is only 28. And now I'm not saying you give up much for him, but I wouldn't be mad about that. Maybe throw him a 5th or something.
Coming off injury, right?
He's coming off an injury. Again, I'm not saying trade for him and he's your answer wide receiver, but I think the Jags are going to absolutely just blow things up. They might even cut him. They could cut him. And I would not be mad at it. Again, he is coming off of a season-ending injury, but it's not like he tore his ACL, he broke his collarbone. It's not like one of those injuries that, could be worrisome in terms of impacting his explosiveness and just ability to play his position. Unfortunately, like we saw with Javonte Williams. So that would be someone I would keep an eye on. Do I think that's going to happen? Probably not, but I think the Jags are just in trouble.
a 3D chess, 4D chess, whatever thing to keep in mind is Kansas City is probably also going to be on the market to trade for a receiver. The Raiders might also be in the market to trade for a receiver to play with
Again.
Sanders. So, like, we're gonna have we're probably gonna need to come in strong to get a guy if we want one, but also to even kind of block some of these other teams, specifically Kansas City, from getting a guy that could really, springboard their offense. So something to keep in mind.
A couple other players that I mentioned this particular guy on the timeline. It was about a couple weeks ago, but I saw this one on the timeline recently for some Bronco fans, and it got me thinking. Rachaad White with Tampa. He's 26 in 2025. He's going to be an unrestricted free agent in 2026. Contract is very doable in terms of trade, and it certainly seems like Bucky Irving, Bo's teammate, has completely taken off down there in Tampa. And then the other guy that I was going to mention, and this is one that I'm kind of filing away, given how things have transpired over there. How would you guys feel about doing a trade for Luke Musgrave down there with the Green Bay Packers?
I believe we talked about Luke Musgrave last week, so I'd be glad to hear Matty's take on that.
I'm not moved, honestly. I feel like it's repeating a lot of what we've done. Musgrave had a nice stint there for a bit. Health is a concern. Kraft has come through and completely taken his role.
Yeah.
And how many people actually knew about Kraft before the season started? I feel like
fantasy football.
I feel like if we're going to go that route, I feel like there's another way that we could go to cement ourselves for the future. Like if it's like a low cost, you give us a sixth, we'll give you Musgrave in a seventh type of thing for some type of a team friendly contract. Okay, maybe to fill out that room, but what is Musgrave giving us that Kroll can't, or that Trotman can't?
Yeah.
I don't know that he's dynamic enough for what we need.
I definitely don't think he is even close to the answer at tight end, so I'd rather draft someone. But
the other option is you just ask little Jordan Humphrey to gain about 20 to 25 more pounds, become a tight end, become the Juwan Johnson of the Denver Broncos, and become that tight end.
Or maybe you.
No, but what did you say? You kind of just broke up there.
Maybe you go get actual Juwan Johnson,
from
New Orleans, and call that good.
Wouldn't be the least bit surprised. It's certainly gonna be a fun offseason. Yeah, I think it's gonna be probably the most exciting offseason the Denver Broncos have probably had since 2014. Even if they don't make those types of slew of moves, just the fact that it's in-house stuff, that are players that are very much deserving of extensions. You have a big game against the Indianapolis Colts where, we all know that every Colt grows up to be a Bronco. I'm sure that Peyton Manning will be rooting for the Denver Broncos. And I'm absolutely positive that the Denver Broncos will be coming away with a victory.
Notice when Peyton Manning was talking about the playoffs, he said, my Broncos will be playing there. He didn't say anything about my Colts.
No.
Every Colt grows up to be a Denver Bronco. Again, want to thank everybody for hopping into the chat. We had a very loaded discussion here tonight. I want to thank everybody. Make sure you hit the subscribe button again over there on YouTube, which is the MHRT Network. We actually just hit 1,400 subscribers over there on YouTube. So we are just continuing to be on the trend up. Make sure you follow Matty over there at Matty Mulls Pod. He's also got another podcast that he does called the Topic Thunder. podcast. Unfortunately, he's a Oklahoma City Thunder fan. But if you are a Thunder fan and you're also a Denver Broncos fan, he is the ideal person to go interact with, because he is a ball knower. And the other ball knower of the show is Brandon Miller. And make sure you follow him over there on Twitter at Brandon Miller PO, and myself at Cameron Parker PO. It has been a phenomenal show. And before we go, remember,
let's go Broncos! God bless Bo Nix!
Fast lane when I pass in the street, bag of money in the passenger seat. Simcoe's been asking for me on the road from the west to the east. Way up, I might never come down, cause the coast racking up the flame out. So high, I might never come down, so what, this is my